Otto and Councilmember Lopez are not present. Approval of agenda.
Make a motion to approve agenda as read.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Public comment time. Anyone here to address council at this time? Hearing none. We'll move on to council no, we don't need to do council announcements. No. Okay, we'll just move right into our economic development strategic planning workshop. Manager.
All right, certainly, Mayor and Council, this is an informal study session with you. We have a couple different presentations. We have Richard from Kern EDC, who will be presenting some of the profile for Shafter and the region. And so all right, so this afternoon's agenda, we have little housekeeping, a couple easels there. One of them's for any bike rack items. That's any items that
Say mic rack?
bike rack
Bike
or
rack.
parking lot, otherwise
Oh,
sometimes
okay.
referred to.
I guess it's not for that.
So we can write down any ideas to follow up on, so we don't lose them or let them slip through the cracks. And then we'll also be recording any new comments that you may have based on the questions and the slot analysis that we'll be presenting here shortly.
Way to stay green with bike racks.
I like that, right? And then we're also going to be covering the Shafter Vision 2011, the 4 areas of focus that we had. As I said, we have Kern EDC, and then as you know, Bob had an opportunity to talk with each of you, to ask you a series of questions to get your perspective on economic development, as well as the SWOT analysis of what we see are our strengths, limitations, opportunities, and or threats. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some proposed strategic goals. And we also want to talk high level on any of the city-owned properties that we have that could present an opportunity for us to pursue additional economic development opportunities. So in 2011, when the Citizens Committee put together a strategic goals, they identified 4 areas: downtown, economic development, education, and recreation. Those are all consistent even today. I think we can point to the amount of work that was done downtown to beautify it. The economic development strategy mainly focused up to date on the logistics center and other internal, in the core city, other projects that the city has undertaken. Education continues to be a strong focal point for the city. And I think the testament of the city council's decision to go ahead and break off from the county and establish its own municipal library is testament to its commitment to education. Recreation, we continue to pursue new opportunities to provide recreational amenities to our residents. We have a recreation district that actually performs providing activities, sports and whatnot, but the city has the parks and the amenities that we make that possible. And so, as you know, we have recently applied for, and we're hopeful that we will be successful in awarding for getting awarded for a Prop 68 grant to help develop the North Shafter Park. We also have, as you'll see later in the regular council meeting, in the ARPA discussion, we have identified some additional projects that will help continue to further enhance our recreational amenities. At this point, I'd like to go ahead and hand it off to Kern EDC. With us is Richard Chapman, President, right, or Executive Director?
Chief Bottle Washer, President and CEO.
Chief Chapman, there you go. Kern EDC.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me here. And Mayor Proud and fellow council members, my name is Richard Chapman, President and CEO of the Kern Economic Development Corporation. And I'm grateful to have the opportunity to talk best practices. And let me go this way. Oh, try that. Okay, perfect. So our organization, our mission is to promote and cultivate Kern County's balanced opportunities for business. And we operate in 5 industry sectors, which are logistics, healthcare, energy, value-added ag and aerospace defense. We're a countywide organization. The city of Shafter is one of our largest members, so we appreciate. Mayor Prout is on our board, as well as John Gwynn with the wonderful company. So we have excellent representation from the city of Shafter. And I know I saw some of you at annual dinner a couple of weeks ago. So how do we promote Kern County? We talked about the endless opportunities for business, and we really are. We position ourselves as being part of Southern California, right? We're next to one of the largest economies in the world, although Shafter is the population center of the state. So interestingly enough, I kind of have those two angles. We are, as I said, 4-hour drive from 90% of the state's population. That plays well, of course, with one of your main industries, transportation, warehousing. Relatively affordable. The housing costs are starting to go up, but we're a place where millennials can buy a home. One of the best places in the country for senior citizens to retire. And the great thing is we're the third most diversified economy in the country. A lot of people don't realize that. We have many legs of the stool. Of course, we're known for oil and ag. We have the ability, city of Shafter, shovel ready, right? Pretty ready to go spaces, unlike most of the state. And we're pro-business. We tongue in cheek say we're the Texas of California. We have oil and we like business. So this is something that really plays well in Kern County as we Melinda is here, who is our VP of Business Development, as she travels around the country recruiting investment into Kern County. Now, talking about legs, there are 3 legs. A lot of people talk about attraction, that gets the headlines, but also retention, expansion. About 80% of new jobs in the economy are from companies already here. They go at 5, 10, 20 at a time. And then entrepreneurial development. We've launched with JP Lake and Secor Kite, Kern Initiative for Talent Entrepreneurship. 90% of net new jobs are from firms less than a year old. So how do we foster that climate for their development? Our portfolio, a lot of the projects, frankly, in our pipeline are looking at Shafter. You can see our breakdown. It's pretty much logistics, manufacturing. And actually during COVID, we've had an uptick in manufacturing, especially renewable manufacturing. And the good thing is a lot of these projects actually have more permanent jobs. It's not just installation, but you can see we have a pretty good mix and energy is growing as well. So in a longer session, we can talk about the definition of economic development, but many people, everyone here has a different definition of economic development. But it's either recruitment or retention of family wage jobs, which are well-paying jobs that have benefits. That's we just define it. Economic wealth, right? For the well-being, overall well-being, not just income, quality of life. There's also qualitative measures of program, showing not just jobs, cap investment, but again, healthcare outlooks and the like. And then net money, and that's the big thing. What money is coming into the community? How much of that money stays? How do we make sure that we have that inflow? And then working together in partnerships, and I'll talk about that public-private partnership. Or simply put, there's 4 I's of economic development, at least in my opinion: inventory, which means space, available buildings, as well as workforce, infrastructure, right? I mean, it's not just about having a building, but that last mile, the conducive for development and growth. Image, what is the image, right, of your community? That's critical. And I know Shafter's always had this image as being almost like a private sector entity, really focused on creating jobs, not about bureaucracy and red tape. And then innovation. How are we adapting to the changes that are occurring as we speak, especially during the COVID era? So a study looked at, when people talk about, is economic development a good investment? Well, you can see on the far left, the red means it brings a net amount of money into community in terms of tax revenue. And then also the space they take, right? So you can see in terms of what takes the most space. Of course, we need residential, right? We're building residential, but if you really want to see where the money is coming from, then you can see on the left-hand side, right? You got hospitality, business to business, auto dealers, in terms of revenue providers. And so as you go through the exercise, looking at your mix of revenue sources.
Mr. Chapman?
Yes.
Over here, real quick. The business to
back.
business with POS use, is that just the point of sale use?
Yes.
Like a Target or something along those lines?
Right, point of sale. Like I know you guys have like your Williams Sonoma, right? You have the call center here. which is important, right? Where that money's the tax, where the sale occurred. So yes, correct.
Thank you.
Sure. So value of a job, and this is I think it's so important. When 100 jobs come to a community, I was looking today, for instance, at the multiplier is something that we all need to be well versed in, because, for instance, at a transportation warehousing facility, 100 jobs creates 100 direct jobs. But guess what? Then you have the indirect, which means the suppliers that work on that project, the capital services. So for 100 jobs in warehouse logistics, you have about 120 jobs that are indirect, and then you have 160 that are induced. So the people working at that facility end up spending money at hotels, restaurants, in the community. So it's a multiplier effect, so important. So for instance, 100 jobs come, you can see what does that translate into beyond at that site. So 7.5 million a year, residential real estate. You can see car, right? Payments, recreation, restaurants. And so this is all ships, right? All ships rise. When you have 100 jobs on the site, you need to realize there's several times more jobs that are created offsite. And so this is something that we like to explain the benefits of these industries and the value. We have a platform called JobsEQ. So we can look at both current data for Bureau of Economic Analysis, Bureau of Labor Statistics for communities. We even have block level analysis. And so we actually have through second quarter 2021. So you can see this is for Shafter, a total employment about 11,000. You can see we picked back up. We're up about 5-6%. Obviously the impact of COVID, but you guys are emerging pretty strong. We also look at jobs housing balance. I don't have the slide. Typically communities want 1-to-1. So one house for one job. And you guys aren't there yet, but you're getting there. I think you have like 0.8 jobs for every home. So I deal with communities that have 3 houses for every job, which is unfortunately not very sustainable. You want that 1-to-1 balance. So we can provide additional information on that, but I think that's important to stress. And then of course, this shows you your industry breakdown, of course, ag, transportation, warehousing. And the good thing is you kind of have built this diversified base, right? You want to, how are you immune to downturns? I mean, think about during COVID, Kern County was #1 in the country for most essential jobs. So what are essential jobs, right? They're logistics, healthcare, or ag, energy, aerospace. So the good thing is that we were with 66% of the jobs in our county were declared essential. Government too, of course. And then you can see kind of a bubble chart. So what the bubble chart does is the size of the bubble is the number of employed. So you can, of course, ag, and then you have location quotient. So location quotient means is the average in the US is 1. So you have 27 times more ag employment than the US average. And then you have, of course, it's not coal, it's power, it's oil up there. And that's again, above the US average by 3.5. And then a lot of the like retail and others are moving to 1. You want to move to 1. So you have the established industries and you have the emerging. And so that's the other thing. And then you can see the forecast. I guess they're forecasting in the next 20 years growth of in ag as well as energy. And so their good news is there's positive growth. There's no industries where you have negative growth forecast. Economic development, again, there's so many different definitions, but the #1 site selection factor is workforce. It's not just having available facility, that's wonderful, but what we see, not just in Kern, right, nationally is workforce availability and quality. I mean, and that's why your community in terms of labor shed has been picked in terms of having the employees within whatever 10, 20 miles for these jobs. But you can see is how well does your community do providing workforce, transportation infrastructure, of course, available buildings and sites. And there's some things, right, state, well, we're not going to probably be able to dictate what the state does in terms of taxation or regulation. But it's, again, at the rubber meets the road. When projects come here, they meet with the city and what is the takeaway? And I'll discuss that a little later. I guess good. So to wrap it up, I love this slide because you can judge your community. I know you're doing SWOT. I know SWOT analysis. What does the L stand for?
Limitation.
Lim.
Okay. So I'd love to show this slide because this really defines a great community. And think about when I see this and I see Shafter, I think you all should be pretty impressed because that lack, it's a divisiveness. Are these projects, investment goes where there's support, right, for development. That's not always the case in a lot of other communities. I worked in Seattle now, and the word development is not even used in the economic development for organizations. But you can see ability of the public to be able to name the local movers and shakers, strong public-private partnerships. They know the story, right, of the community. There's pride, there's a sense of pride, appreciation, and also, yes, the history is important, but what are we going to do for our kids? And then the downtown, of course, that's, right, what is the potential? You're seeing this investment start to come in. Entrepreneurs are looking for an opportunity. They want to be their own boss. So how do we provide? That's like with Kite, we provide the mentoring and the talent as well as that guidance and funding. And so we are planning on coming up to Shafter for a future Kite meeting, which I think would be great to showcase your community. And then nearby research, well, that's that's something as we work with university and others. How do we develop research institutions that create jobs, great companies that spin off and tech transfer commercialization? Strong community college at the city center. These are aspirations too, right? Creative, right? Experimental public schools. I mean, you have like charter, you have with the Wonderful Academy, amazing. I talked to Manuela yesterday about the students that are moving through that. Dave Franz is on our foundation, KDF, which does the symposium. So again, you have some leaders there. Inclusive, open all groups, right? Sense of community working together, and that big dream. What is that? Your big dream? And is it agreed upon by most people? And then of course, brewing. They've added the brew industry. I'm not sure if Shafter has any local breweries, but I'm sure that's coming. So I think that's a good way of wrapping it up within the time frame. So I appreciate your listening and as well as, of course, your support of what our organization and mission is.
Anyone have any questions, Richard?
Love the information.
It gets exciting, doesn't it?
Thank you. Well, I love the colorful charts and graphs.
Well, that too, but I mean, it is exciting when you really decide what you want, what you see for your community.
Right. Yes.
Did I hear right? You said 90% of the net new jobs come from businesses that are less than 1 year old.
Yeah.
So the 10% increase in employment that Shafter would have seen, 90% of that would have come from a new business that was created.
Well, in general, so like you have large companies that tend to hire and then lay off, right? Well, a lot of our industries, typically they're more like the ag and oil industries. So they're just saying that if you look at the net new jobs in any local community, 90% of those are from young firms. The challenge we have is we are in the top 5 in the country for startup activity.
Oh, really?
But then you go to the next category. Our startups don't last as long as other areas. They last 2 quarters, 3 quarters, and they don't pay as well. So this is kind of a catch-22. The vitality are based on these young firms, but this churn rate is not working to our advantage. That's why Kite and other, working with the Small Business Development Center, because those companies are the ones that are going to start that growth, right?
Mm-hmm.
They make it past year 1, then the odds of them succeeding are even greater.
Understandable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? No? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor,
Yes.
council members.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Bob Meadows. I'm the Economic Development Director for the City of Shafter. First, thank you, Richard, for coming, and Melinda Brown. We really appreciate, Kern EDC has always been big fans of Shafter, and we appreciate their support. So thanks for being. I had the pleasure of talking to Your Honor, the Mayor, and Mayor Pro Tem Givens, Councilmember Espinoza, as well as Councilmember Alvarado. And we just sent some questions to you, and then we had a great discussion and really appreciate your input. Kind of consolidated those and want to go over some today. I know that you put a lot of thought into them, and they really are some of the basis of what we're going to look at going forward as we as we discuss what the future of Shafter is going to be. So the first question that we posed to you was what does economic development mean to you? And gathering that kind of a consensus from you, there were definitely some common themes through many of your comments. But a means of growth commercially and industrially that allow job seekers to excel in their careers while maintaining livelihood in their city. I want to keep Shafter people here and have the jobs here as well. That we not only provide for the job seekers, but also for the business entrepreneur. We just heard from Richard how important that will be for Shafter. That it benefits everyone, the businesses, the residents, and the government. That's a win-win-win there. So I think we know it is not an overnight success. All good things in building economic development do take time. This is where we're going. It is a partnership between government, citizens, and the business owners. That's Shafter's reputation, certainly long before I got here, and certainly something we want to continue to maintain and support our business owners there. Generating sales tax for the city, obviously, that helps us support the growth that we continue to see. So all of you were definitely in favor of, or that meant something to you. And I think a great point was not solely seeking the new businesses, but helping retain those that we already have. Folks that have already committed to Shafter. They're here, they're doing business. What can we do to help them? I certainly have enjoyed those conversations with business owners here and using connections, resources that I have from my previous career to be able to help them. So that's something I think was a good point, and all of you have thought about that. In reviewing those, are other thoughts come to mind from the three of you here today? Are there anything that you think more about?
Said so much that day, Bob.
We captured it all.
It was pretty diverse because even Richard said that in his presentation, everyone sees it as in their own eyes as maybe different, but yet it is the same.
Certainly.
I mean, it's what we want to see to prosper, so we can do better and feel better.
Certainly.
I just like that we're taking the time to discuss this,
That's right.
to bring out some possible, options, outcomes.
Well, it's something that we haven't really done before, so it was good that we do. So, all right. Then the next question we had for you was, what type of revenue generating businesses would be compatible to Shafter? So kind of crossed over with some of those, and call centers was on there. That we of course know that could be challenging in the future. We'll have to see what those are available. Hotel and lodging, we have discussed that. We don't have a hotel. As we discussed, all of us, the thought of the coming sports fields is going to bring people to town for events. We certainly hope in the future, as well as one of you had mentioned to me, that when people come for weddings or funerals or other family events, there's nowhere to stay in Shafter. So it's something definitely that we have been talking about, and you were on that as well. Certainly more restaurants, not only to have a greater, because we all love to eat, but a greater choice there, but also they do generate revenue for us. Grocery store, we certainly hear that quite a bit, and a grocery store that delivers. I think grocery stores in the past year through COVID times, that was a service that was developed. Many stores have expanded that in their service offerings. And so it's something that Shafter deserves as well. A bowling alley and entertainment venues. That was a real interesting one, and I guess I should have thought of that. But that certainly has possibilities, and family entertainment involvement. Any kind of bowling alley would have a little restaurant inside of it, of course. So it would just be the gift that keeps giving. But just one good idea. There's certainly more to come. Entertainment venues, theater, and batting range, and other things like that were different ideas that kicked around. And I think once we start thinking about it, we may come up with even more. A Home Depot or Lowe's, obviously with homes, people want to work on their homes, something like that. If we could attract such a large franchise, we do have 2 outstanding hardware stores here in Floyd's and True Value, but competition is always good, and a little bigger offering wouldn't hurt. And the truck refueling station, I know that that has been discussed, and we talked about that off of 99 behind the new corner market, that there's been discussion about the spot right behind that. That discussions with Jonathan about, we certainly could use some truck parking. And so it kind of is part of the discussion there, but that the closeness to 99 certainly makes it an attractive piece over there, just off of Lerdo and Zerker and 99. So any other thoughts since we had the chance to talk about other businesses that come to mind for you?
I didn't think about entertainment venues. I guess my question and looking at that is, with what's happened in the last 18 months, give or take, what does that look like as a whole? Kern County, Shafter, is that something we're going to see come back alive? Because at one time, or let's say pre-2020, entertainment venues were thoroughly packed, right? Whatever it may have been, from a melodrama to a movie theater and everything around that. Today, you can buy a ticket at a movie theater and sit anywhere you want to sit because there's rarely anybody there.
Right.
Are we going to see a comeback in that? Or are we going to, if we're forecasting, what is that going to look like moving forward?
It's a good question. And I think those what trends that were started now, as they begin to reverse, at what pace will they reverse?
Yeah.
And to what extent? Certainly it's something to consider. But, and is it something that is perhaps more spread out as we have seen in some of these venues? But then that decreases revenue. So it's a trade-off there. It's a good discussion point. Something we want to, and certainly anyone we would talk to in the future, that would be something, the investment from an individual would be important. So as to how successful that could be.
What would that look like if we were to survey residents on that specific question?
We'd have to see. I have a feeling we're going to wind up doing some of that anyway, because we certainly want the input. We don't have a lot of folks here today, but as the discussions increase, I think Shafter people have always been good about speaking up.
Mm-hmm.
And we certainly like their opinions. That helps us all decide what to chase, right? So I think it'd be a great question.
If in doing a survey, would we be able to step outside of the 93263 area code and at least ask what would it take to drive them here?
Mm-hmm.
Servicing our own, absolutely. Seeing a growth economically in entertainment venues, right? What would it take to bring people here?
Sure.
Question. And I think he had a question for us too, Mr. Chapman.
Councilmember Mayor, we work with projects like Hard Rock and Bear, if anything, but if there's full steam ahead, that there was a discussion that some folks said, what is the size going to be? In fact, it's going to be the same, if not larger. So that project is, there's this almost need to get out and spend money, look at like Las Vegas and other communities. Also, the hotels, the ones in the other communities, are filled to the brim because of a consequence of the housing market being so hot, rental rates. Businesses are putting, so our, of course, our more qualitative side, but we think there's going to be the GDP projections for next year are through the roof. So that consumer spending is really kind of a pin up.
Okay.
I know I mentioned bowling alleys. I know Tehachapi just announced they're going to have a bowling alley entertainment venue. And so I think, especially in the recreation type expenditure, all the data that we see points to strong 2022.
Good. Okay.
We're saving a lot of money during COVID.
This is why we bring it for encouragement.
Yeah, spin it. Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
I only ask, we as a family, we love going to the venues. I don't fear COVID. I guess I can get backlash for that, but I don't. We will go to our venues. We will enjoy our family time through the process, but I don't know what that looks like across the board.
right.
That's the only reason I ask.
I think as a society, that's going to have to be how much and how quickly does it rebound, certainly. And that's something as far as any kind of survey or that kind of thing, we would certainly explore that. But just the ideas, that's what we want to, as our city manager said, kind of our informal discussion, kind of get the ideas out there and start that discussion and mindset going. So
Thank you.
okay.
Sorry.
The next question that we discussed was, what type of businesses would support the community besides providing jobs? And we certainly instantly thought about some of the bigger companies like wonderful Target and Shell attracting others like that, that they would do that. Any business in the ag industry, those ag folks always seem to get involved in the community. But I think we all wound up discussing something, the concept that any business coming to Shafter should be willing to get involved in the community, should be willing to in some way be a partner, provide some kind of additional support or interest. I know that others that have been involved in the Shafter Christmas store, the Learning Center, and other things around the city. So I think companies that come here, I think they know what kind of community we have, and they are interested in being a part of that. So any other thoughts about specific industries that you think would be good for supporting the community besides providing jobs?
I don't know if I like the word should be willing. I think they are willing.
Mhm.
I believe high-end corporations carry an arm of philanthropic efforts that they're going to spend the money in the community, whether they give money or they have people who do work in the community one way or another, they're going to be a part of it. It's part of their good neighbor efforts, right?
Mhm.
Then you mentioned some of them in the top line there.
Mhm.
But then back to this idea of 90% of the workforce coming from, 1 year or less startups. Most people who are going to start a business think either A, I'm going to make a lot of money, but for the most part, it's I don't have this thing in my community and I can make my community better because I'm going to offer this thing.
Mhm.
So I think most people come into the notion of I'm helping my community in general, whether it's cleanup around the area, providing something that no one else has. I think that's kind of the idea of it.
Sure.
Thinking on the idea of how they support our community. I don't want it to be so focused on monetary gains as much as it is, what can I do with my time and my efforts?
Mhm. In my experience, I will say that many new business owners, they certainly don't have the money, but they'll make the time.
Yes.
Because that is some self-promotion. So it's not entirely benevolent, perhaps. However, they are interested. If you're coming here and you're going to operate your business and you want the community to support you, you need to support the community and get involved in something that means something to you. So I think, I do believe that's kind of inherent in anyone that wants to come and do business. I think you're right. Today, almost everyone has a philanthropic arm of their business. If they're smart, they've got to be part of the community. If you just come in and make money off of everyone there, I just don't think you're going to last long. And so no one really, if that was a mindset many years ago, it certainly isn't today. So I think we have good partners.
I do believe for the larger scale corporations, I don't think it's a matter of if they will give time, money, whatever. I think it's a matter of how. And I don't know if there is a connection point between what we do here locally, which is a segue to talk about the chamber, but we're not talking about the chamber, but how do they step in and help in one way or another? And someone like the chamber being involved, not just in businesses, having a time for businesses to talk to one another, but really the chamber to understand fully what is happening in the community and how can other people help out with this project or this cleanup or this whatever. Put your thing here, right? And if there's a connection between what's happening in the community and what the businesses are trying to give into, I think that'll definitely play into how they help the community overall. I just don't know if that thing, that center hub, and I keep going back to chamber, I don't know if it exists today to be that hub.
Certainly something that we've got to consider as part of this, our whole movement. But I think our community engagement managers certainly help with the social media penetration and exposure that we have now. More and more people just simply are aware of things. And so we have others willing to share, as the county shared with me with their American Job Center, some information, which when we put out through the social media. So I think we can engage the community on that, and ultimately the chamber will be part of that, I'm sure. Yeah. So good. Okay. Any other thoughts on that one?
Mayor Pro Tem, just to kind of summarize, I think what I understood you wanted to talk about businesses investing was businesses that foster investment and community goodwill. Would that be a fair statement of capturing your thought?
Yeah, and again, I don't think it's a should. I believe they already do. I don't see that connection making place. I'll give you a really prime example. The scoreboard that's coming up here at Shafter High. they began the process, but they hadn't really found anyone who was going to donate. And we made quite literally two simple calls, a call into us and a call into the chamber. And the chamber reached out. And I think within 72 hours, they had all their sponsors
sure.
done, right? And more who are saying, well, is there anything else I can do? I want to be a part. And that's where I look at that is there's people who are willing to invest. There's people who are willing to give, whether it's time, whether it's money. I just don't feel like there's a hub that exists today that's taking, here's my need, here's my partner to fill that need or that void and seeing that thing resolved. So again, I don't think it's they should. I believe most large scale corporations and 99% of all family owned, even small businesses, believe that they want to help. They just don't know how or who to talk to begin that process. Sorry.
So it's like identifying a clearinghouse, if you will. Someone administers that clearinghouse to be able to say, here's what city projects we have, and kind of shares that with the different businesses and stays in contact with them, kind of something like that.
Mhm.
I'm trying to capture your thoughts so we document it so we can follow up on that.
I can't even capture my own thoughts sometimes.
Well, but I agree with him because we have to look at the diversity that we have in this community that, as I'm listening here and trying to figure out how do you really get that? Because we can offer an awful great amount of projects, ideas, just to be involved, and yet you have to have that contact by someone. I don't know if it's a clearinghouse, maybe. I never thought of a clearinghouse as such, but years ago they had hospitalities, and maybe that's what we've been lacking. Then I think about, well, COVID really created where everybody just stayed home, and now we're having a hard time getting them out of the house. But I know we're here to talk about beyond that. And so, yeah, we have to come up with that. That seems to be the key.
There's so many
Yes.
events that we've done in the past that we don't do today. And is it because lack of help? Is it because I'm not going to sit here and say it's because of lack of money, right? I think people are willing to invest
You can get
whatever it
money
may be.
from
Money's going to, yeah. But I think there's just not enough. There's not enough conversation that's taking place that people will understand. Oh, you just need a few people to help you with this event, and your event can continue on every single year. You know what? I'm here. Let me help you out. The city years ago used to do a harvest festival, which is should be coming up in a couple of weeks, and we haven't done one for.
Oh, you're talking about
At the park.
colors event?
No. The harvest festival we do in October.
Oh dear, yeah, that was what
Kiwanis was doing
Well,
it,
there was a
correct.
parade, yes.
Yeah, and I
It's
think a lot
gone.
of it, again, it's not based on that somebody wasn't going to provide funds for it. A lot more of it was based on trying to gain enough help to be able to put something on. And you were seeing 3,000 or 4,000 people walking through Mantle Park at any given moment, right? And I don't think that's a city-run event. I do not
No.
believe it should be a city-run event. I think there's a ton of service clubs and there's a ton of nonprofits who want to help and do that kind of thing, which is great, right? People want to be a part of the community, but they're all looking for help, and there's no one for them to go to and say, hey, my contact's Bob. And if I just say, hey, Bob, hey, we're doing this really cool event. Do you know anyone who can help? Yeah, sure. And the connection's made. We don't have that hub. So whatever you want to call it, clearinghouse.
Investment in volunteer capital.
Sure.
A volunteer, oh, that's a key.
Voluntary capital.
Whatever the case may be, but I believe it exists. And I think you guys, you see it in what you guys do as well. It's consistent across the board. Yes, ma'am.
Say like a volunteer center.
Mm-hmm.
When you have, you can assign someone to be your chair for a volunteer center.
Mm-hmm.
And they all know where to go to participate. It's your, that's a rule for your,
Mm-hmm.
It's
very good.
Mhm.
and then volunteer just makes it recognized. Then people know where to go to volunteer.
That's the beauty of Shafter being a tight knit community. And, and one part of us is a large, diverse, business group. And the other piece of us, you walk outside and within a second, 12 people who just walked by you, it's fantastic.
So you have a volunteer center, but then you have to have the organizers too,
Mhm.
big time.
I think we captured the essence.
I think so.
Yeah, it has to have a spark brought in.
Yeah, exactly.
It would appear we'll be talking more about this.
Oh, you need another job?
I meant was as part of this process, Your Honor.
That's right, that's
Yes.
right.
She heard something very different there, Bob.
Still working on this job I have. All righty. Thank you. Great comments. Appreciate that. We also had this important question. What could the city do to retrain our workforce? We talked about that switching down because with some of the decline and proposed decline or projected decline in oil for sure, and then automation in ag, those things are going to cause problems in dominant industries that we have, as Richard pointed out, that ag has been our dominant industry. So some of your thoughts on this part was working with someone like BC to bring in opportunities of certifications in some of the different trades. Those still are necessary. Welding and fabrication, electrical, certainly computer training,
It is true.
skills for jobs where technicians are heavily needed. I know I see all kinds of vehicle maintenance
Bring them in different
and repairs that need help.
from what they did.
To reinforce the education, specifically STEM for youth. And I think in order to get higher test scores, I think our high school has really been stellar in that area. I mean, Shafter High is well known for their progressiveness in that area. And Richard's at the foundation, the Kern Economic Development Foundation, also has been a few years ago shifted focus to STEM education. And so that's important. And then with the thought that perhaps Wonderful may ultimately share their training site with the public, as it's certainly going to be internal, but as a place to train. What are some of your thoughts on that as far as helping our workforce?
Keep talking. I got stuck on the word retrain. Is it retrain or retain? But then as you talked about this, maybe it is an idea of retraining. The shift of economics, the shift of economics locally and nationally means that some of the things we've done 40 years ago, 30 years ago are not the same thing that's happening today. We don't have 1,000 people in a warehouse moving boxes from point A to point B. We have 150 who are telling a robot where to move that box, right? Which is the difference from hand labor to STEM. So at first, when I read this, I said, oh, Bob, it should be retain. But no, I think you're right. The idea of retraining is, I haven't looked at it like that. It's interesting.
Well, certainly keeping people, we want to keep people
Yeah.
working a Shafter, but it's just that what you do now, you may not be able to do much longer. That is going to change. It's difficult, certainly. Councilmember Espinoza, you're involved in the ag industry heavy as far as on the ground, right? And boots on the ground. And some of those functions will wind up being automated, certainly are being such, right? So how do we help the folks that are out there, that those jobs won't be available? What else can we do? And you've also got some generational things in there as well. It's multi-layered and certainly concerned, but we want to help. Is there something the city can do? Or we've got, as mentioned, Bakersfield College, but the county has some programs and they've started to, I've made connections with them at the America's Job Center and start to think of what else can we do to help folks. But what other thoughts did you have perhaps in this area as we try to retrain or redirect careers or upgrade skills? Or I'm not sure exactly every explanation we want to give. So other thoughts on that from any of you? Thoughts you want to express?
Well, I think that the workforce, the number of people that are needed to do the manual jobs, they are dwindling. Okay, so but the things that like bringing in BC with trade education, where they can do the hands-on training, where they can still do the fabricating, welding, electrical, construction. All that stuff still needs to be done. And I don't think they've seen a drop off in their numbers, because I don't know of too many computers that can grab a hammer or a wrench, but they can do repetitious jobs. But as far as the actual construction of you know, laying asphalt, doing things, my wife, for example, works for a assisted living facility, and she's telling me that they cannot find physical therapists, and they're willing to pay them anywhere between $90 to $120 an hour, and they're bringing them all the way in from LA and the surrounding areas, and they're paying their housing, their meals, their mileage and everything, plus their wages, just to get them here. So things like that, you know, that could be nursing. There's a big shortage of nursing. Trying to get the younger people who are willing to make that change, you know, get them willing to take on that challenge and take on a new career. You know, the older ones, you know, maybe, you know, still set in their ways, but the younger ones, we need to focus in on them. And I think trying to get their schooling levels up at higher levels where they can advance. And then for those that don't want to go to college, like say a 4-year college and everything, BC is a perfect school. It's a 2-year college where you can go in and get an education and then get an AA and move on from there.
Well, I think Richard has mentioned, and I've heard him say several times, that when companies are seeking new employees, the number one, the best determinant for who gets the job is someone who has an internship, a paid internship. And then secondly is internships. So companies do that, but then that's good, but how, that's from coming out of college. And how do we, and we certainly want to do that. We want to help our youth move into bigger, better jobs, and obviously keep them here as we can to help the city of Shafter. But are those some of those same things, can those be available to others that are looking, that need to change careers? And so, and with the other things that are coming into Shafter, what else does that mean for them? So perhaps we can't directly do that as a city, but maybe it's we work with these outside partners and resources, and certainly KEDC has enough contacts to help us there, and the colleges, and BC has made a greater commitment to us. And so I think those are all great ideas, and that we hopefully will continue to work on that. This is going to be an ongoing topic, I think, as we look out, because workforce development is economic development to help our residents do better. They do better, we all do better. So, any other thoughts there? Okay. Well, we did this SWOT analysis: strength, limitations, opportunities, and threats. And we had a lot of common themes here as we talked about some of the strengths of the city of Shafter. Well-located, safe community, low crime. We know that from that Cal State survey that the police department was very popular. It was probably the #1 response, which makes us very unique in our country today, but very, very gratifying to see that. Our low cost of living, certainly that's predominant in Kern County, but definitely here in Shafter. Smart growth that was well thought out, from a well thought out general plan that we continue to follow, and I think has helped Shafter shine in the county. Strong school partnerships, certainly with the high school and our middle schools here, junior high, the smaller schools, the Grimway Academy, but also the colleges around the area. I think people like to work with Shafter. And that is a strength. Great customer service from experienced staff. Speaking for all my coworkers, they do a great job. Been here a long time and do take care of people. I think that's what much of what Shafter is known for. Our own rail spur and track, that definitely is a strength that we have, something we have that others do not. Minter Field, you mentioned, and Minter Field is, I asked Jonathan Hudson if he minds if I promote Minter Field as, if it's dirty and noisy, can we bring you there? And he said, yes, I like that. And so they are definitely a gem for us to have for industry and other businesses. And they get looked at a lot, and their proximity to 99 is helpful. So that subject has come up, and they only lease out there. So they do provide a great alternative for businesses, and brokers and agents often inquire to me about that. So that's definitely a strength. And we are financially stable. We just had that audit read by Roger last last meeting, and that's our reputation as well, and certainly the city has worked on that. Other strengths that you think of while we blow our horn because we deserve it?
I have two.
Yes, sir.
We're one of the best groups of folks to work with when it comes to business development from our planning department. It's very easy to get your stuff through the system compared to many other places.
And we have our new planning director, Steve, who intends to perpetuate that reputation.
And yes, I agree. And then we have some strategic locations of land available. I don't really see that on here, and I think we need to speak more to that and having the opportunity to see growth on
We
that.
will be.
Yeah.
Tonight. Good. Your Honor?
Available land.
Okay. Strengths are good. We also talked about some limitations that we might have here at Chapter, that we lack a staple thing. And we can discuss that. That was brought up. Let's, thoughts on that? What staple thing means to you as our council?
Stable or stable?
Staple. I mentioned it. Many communities have their thing, their whatever it may be that they are known by, right? I'll use this because you're familiar with it. Gilroy has there it is. So everyone knows that, right? So what is our staple thing? If people, this goes back to the idea that we want hotels and lodging in here. Why? Why do we want hotels and lodging in here? What is that staple thing that's going to drive people to say, I have to be a part of Shafter? What is it? That's where I feel there's a limitation. What is that staple thing that brings us in? That whatever.
It is something we're going to continue to discuss with you.
It's on here though. You don't have to put it anymore. You got it.
Yeah, we know that. There was a reluctance of boomers, and I didn't take this personally, in accepting new ideas that may result in changes. I think that generational thing here, it's always at work as young people rise and begin to be more involved in the community. Shafter's a location too close to Bakersfield. We all know some of those limitations and the closeness and the short time it takes. Maybe coming back to some of the staple thing. And as far as his next comment, not a traveling spot or destination. You either work here or live here. Those two kind of go together. And that proximity sometime keeps business in Bakersfield, maybe even Wasco at times, but certainly in Bakersfield for their size and proximity. So,
I
yeah.
want to go back to the one you said before. Shafter's location is too close to Bakersfield.
Thank you.
What does that say? I mean, I think Bakersfield's important.
Mhm.
I think Shafter's important, but I don't know that we're too close causes a limitation.
Well, I think because that can, a business may be hesitant to put open here or open an additional office in Shafter when they have something in Bakersfield that they would consider close enough that perhaps they've tracked their business and they find that they're getting business from Shafter and they don't need necessarily, but not enough maybe to open a second location or additional location. I think.
But we have had that.
Mhm.
I mean, we've had businesses that have located here because they wanted to be out of Bakersfield. So I don't know why it says that we're too close. And I don't know who was expressing that, but I think there are more pluses in being close to Bakersfield. It's important to us,
Mhm.
or it is important to me. I've always felt that it's good to have the center
Mhm.
of your county close by.
Well,
So I don't know what the feeling was. That's what I was asking.
I'm concurring with that, by the way.
I apologize for coming in late and sort of trying
Oh,
to catch up,
That's okay.
where the topics were and what's going on here, but I'm not sure if this is something I mentioned or not during the time that Bob and I talked, but again, I'm not quite sure the context, but it's, if those residents in Gossamer Grove right now, they're there. And now this is referring to businesses or we're.
just in limitations on us for economic development, what kinds of things, in a general sense. That's what we're
Okay.
looking at.
I know, as far as just because of Rosedale is so, I mean, maybe in the context of the chapter here today, this core city, for me, I would go to, you know, trying to, at the end of the day, we all want to buy a lot, quality, but cheap. Because we want to stretch our dollars, right? So, and because of that, we always try to shop. And if you don't have many places to shop from, and Bakersfield has those places that you could get, you know, a lower price, but still quality, you're gonna make that extra drive to Bakersfield. And on, you know, in this case too, Walmart is in Wasco now. And because Walmart is in Wasco, for the core city here, I think, you know, I'm not speaking for the whole town, but there's a good handful of people that go to Wasco because Walmart. But do I discourage buying local? No, I don't. But at the same time, a lot of people are on a budget, you know. So having businesses come to shop, I guess, meaning what I was looking at more at the people in Gossamer Grove would rather come to the core city or go to Rosedale. I think they would go to Rosedale, spend their money in Rosedale, then come into the core city. Now, the decision that Walmart made to go to Wasco, then I don't know if we made an attempt or you know, to bring them to Shafter at some location, maybe by the airport. I don't know if that's, well, you know, just looking at what it is now. And I could see the reason why they went to Wasco because of 43 and I mean, in 46, catching the traffic going through. How do we, the question could come, how do we get a big box business like maybe Lowe's or Home Depot to come to core city? I don't know if that could be even possible, just because of do we have a major traffic component that could support that? You know, maybe closer to 99 off Lerdo, that might be just catching the traffic in between Delano and Bakersfield. So I'm not quite sure if that was if this was something I said, it was because of the people in Gossamer Grove would rather go to Bakersfield to get their product than to come to the core city.
Well,
Is
I
that-
think, I don't think anything is kind of etched in stone here that
No,
we're looking at that.
Right.
As we discuss, I think that has a little nuance to it, as you said about Gossamer Grove, that definitely,
Mhm.
that could be a choice there. There's not something right
Yeah,
there.
because some of our businesses come in, or some of our businesses are patronized by people that live in Bakersfield or anywhere else in the county because of what they offer. And I think we need to look to expand that. I think that's, social media today certainly opens that up, because the way of shopping and the way of getting whatever product you want is so much easier today, and it's going to change from what we have anyway. So, I mean, we're looking beyond that because it's going to be the future that's got retraining. I mean, it's the job, but it's retraining everybody else that's there. Richard, you had a comment?
Yes, Mayor. So two quick things. Leakage, have you measured your retail leakage? That's pretty straightforward. We can help you with that versus other surrounding communities. And right as like Councilmember Alvarado said, I equate it to Meadows Field, because why doesn't Meadows Field have the same number of non-stops that Fresno has? Well, people save $100 driving propane. So they're right. There are these other options that are not available. Let's say you're in Fresno. So that's the big thing in my opinion. Those feels back, but yeah, we should look at the leakage. What percentage of your residents' dollars are being spent outside the community? Of course, changes a lot. But yeah, that's something that at least you could start.
That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Well, sometimes the limitation sounds like it's beyond, but we can offer other things that brings interest here. For instance, I don't know, are you aware of a war dog park? A war dog. Okay, people talk about having a dog park. I mean, I've heard that over and over. We need a dog park. We need a dog park. Well, this lady comes forward and Lennar is offered to buy this dog, and it's in a dedication, and it's going to be known. Chapter Kern County is going to have a war dog park. I mean, they're going to come out there and see that dog. No, it's, but it recognizes the people that were in a war. Yeah,
Recognize the military.
right. You know, so I mean, I think those are, and
That's a niche that you're right. but
That's
you
right.
differentiate yourself.
right. And you know what? And that came from a person who does happen to live out there because they have some new parks going in. I mean, we have some existing parks, but they didn't really fit in what we have right here in the core. And yet, you know, it's going to be known for that. I thought it was very unique. I'm excited about it. And they're having a big ceremony out there in a couple weeks here. And, you know, it'll make the news for Kern County, and yet it's in Shafter.
I think she said it's going to be the second one in California.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I'm not saying that we're going to have a bunch of war dog parks, but, but I mean, there's got to be something else that we can attract to come here.
Right.
Well, and that's that you mentioned, right?
Mhm.
About
Whatever you want to call
the
it.
staple. I love that. You know, and that's what Bakersfield, right? With the regional branding initiative, we worked for the county on the county and city, county chamber, and work together. What is the brand of the community? And what we've always found is that, especially for Bakersfield, is outside when we're outside the region, we're not the ambassadors we should. We almost apologize and use words like, "Oh, you think it's hot? We think it's crime." You know, all these other air quality, and they're actually much more positive about the community in the Bay Area in LA than we think they are. So their perception is much more positive. So that's the thing I've done for Chapter in terms of that. What are your residents when they're promoting? What are the words they use? And that comes down to that state. What is Chapter? And you all probably wouldn't even amongst yourself have a different recognition. So this is the thing where we all have to be consistent. Make sure that whatever we choose.
Well, some of the things that Shafter used to be known for was potatoes. You know, there's no longer.
Moscow is a roast city.
Yes, and then, you know, cotton was heavily grown in the area. And then, you know, that's kind of given away. And then now you got multiple almond, you know, producers. I mean, there's almond producers all over the place. So it's not like it's just located in Shafter, it's everywhere. But those what I would consider that's been staple issues from the past, but we've kind of lost those with things that have changed. As far as just having the availability of just the variety of the selection that you need, I think that's where Shafter falls a little short, just because, I mean, I don't know how many times we'll need something and you go to a local part store or a distributor and then they say they don't have it. So then you have to move on to Bakersfield, but you just can't carry everything, you know, and then sometimes you don't have the flexibility to wait for 24, 48 hours or 72 hours to have it shipped. You know, you need it right there and then.
Well, I also would say for us, Chapter, we think about what businesses think of your, obviously residents are critical, but the great thing is, you know, you guys are one of the things that we look on for our businesses. We know the red carpet will be, will be there, rolled out for them. So I think you should be proud of that. Obviously, there are other, you're not just about business, your residents, quality of life. But for us, at least, you know, for us, you guys are doing an amazing job. The outside world, when they hear about Chapter and business, you guys are rock stars. That's something that I like to hear all the time.
Well, and that's really, and Staples, I mean, I didn't know really what Staples really meant, but when we met years ago, it was to brand our community for almonds. And that's why February was picked, and that's why it went to colors and arts. And I can say that it was successful in a way that it brought in outside people, but it didn't really apply or appeal to a lot of our local citizens. Even though it tried to be diverse, it just didn't seem to have enough to really pull everybody in. And
that's the thing I'd like to say with new money. Why is Hard Rock
Mm.
casino hotel so exciting for our region. Because 90% plus, that was the money coming in, it's from out of the county, it would not come here, it would not stay there, and it did not have that facility.
Mhm.
And so that's the other thing, you're right, who's coming into your to spend with the definition of your money, like, I love the arts and the like, but I always say, well, what percentage of people came from outside your
That's right.
city to spend money?
Right.
And that's really where, that money is.
Mm.
I guess I'll digress back to this idea about the proximity of being close to Bakersfield. I don't know if I find it as a limitation as much as a potential or even a strength, actually, because there's a very large area that doesn't have as much commercial growth. Now they're starting to, and I think depending on how we manage the growth commercially in that specific area of taking Gossamer, it can either be on the Shafter side or on the Bakersfield side. But within the next 2 to 7 years, something's going to be done in that specific area. Question is it going to be done in 93263? Or is it going to be done in 93, pick a number, 93314 or 12? I don't know what the number is over there. But there's an opportunity that if business X comes into this location, they're not just pulling from Shafter, right? So there's a strength suddenly that we're pulling from that Bakersfield, Rosedale area and the surrounding area, which is the same reason that Kern High decided to put a high school campus somewhere on, is it Rudd? Somewhere in that range, because they know they're not just pulling in Bakersfield, but the Rosedale, Rio area, along with the Gossamer and the continued growth that we're going to see there. So I don't know if I see it as a limitation as much as a potential. We just have to jump on it sooner.
Well, I feel this surge of Shafter pride and fighting spirit from everyone. So, and I think it's great. I'm just gonna kind of touch on these others because I think we don't want limitations, but we at least perhaps we'll just say, let's be realistic about potential things here that may, and perhaps they're not, perhaps they are in fact opportunities, which we'll get to briefly, but we mentioned historical poverty. Of course, that's documented. Few healthcare options. We've explored more of those, but we don't have them yet. Insufficient housing in all levels. That's going to be a topic we're going to be addressing. Lack of funding for infrastructure. I think that's a persistent problem for most cities, and the limited mass transit availability. So those are all things that, as you mentioned, Mayor Pro Tem Givens, may lead to other opportunities. So.
Well, and you know what, for Shafter, and maybe this is the time to say it, Shafter doesn't have to just look at Shafter right here. We've always thought and felt that you look beyond it. And that's where we kind of forget sometimes, and we're not just benefiting you and me, we're benefiting all of Kern County, and we go beyond that. How often do you hear people say they travel to the coast for entertainment? They travel to Fresno, they travel to LA. I mean, you're doing all of this because you're benefiting in the same way. It's all entertainment, and yet it's all over.
Agreed.
You got to reach out.
Well, let's explore some of these opportunities briefly. Some better paying jobs out at the wonderful industrial park seem to be coming. Certainly some of these distribution centers, and they're paying more. The livable wage that the B3K studies show that was in the 20 to 22 range. And I've talked to some of those general managers out there, and that is definitely the trend. Expanding on some current business endeavors, establishing stronger connections with some businesses in town, assisting them. The community growth that could attract that hotel and additional dining options, are the revival of downtown, the fiber business and rail service also with possibilities there that will take some more study and discovery. But some of those things came out of our discussions I had with you. Any other particular opportunities that you thought of that we might add or additionally consider besides these as we go forward? There's plenty there.
Plenty there. So don't just look at the whip. look at the work that we have on Lerdo as well.
Mhm.
I feel like we're missing a big portion of opportunity with that Lerdo 99 interchange. And I go back and I'll say it again, from county line in Delano to I-599 merge. What is there for truck stops or anything along those lines? One opportunity. So it'd be nice to see some growth there.
Actually going to know that there will be three that, but 3 or 4
Mhm.
to have some. I would also say something about the Gossamer Grove area. We spoke to the Gossamer Grove people. It's commercial and the 3 specific plants: Gossamer, Heritage Park, Mission Lakes.
Right.
But they're saying right now, currently the rooftops are not really getting much bite on commercial. We have certainly explored it, but no one has really what their feedback is. We don't have quite enough rooftops that justify fleet. But I think it will get there. I think there is a real opportunity to in the next 5-10 years, where you are capturing that point of sale, north of 7 stands,
Right.
rather than south.
And Lennar owns that land, commercial land, right?
Correct.
So I know they're not just looking at what's sitting in that and on the north side of 7 Center. They're looking at what's on that south side as well. So when they're talking rooftops, yes, Gossamer plays a big piece of that, but they know that if they have commercial land that's been designated as such, they have to put something there to make money. And so I know they're counting more than just what's sitting next to them in a 2,000-foot radius.
Correct, and there are definitely tracks that are going developed or being south of 7th Standard, around the Callaway area, Allen Road. So the rooftops are getting there.
Yes.
The rooftops are getting there, and I think if you think intelligently about those commercial areas, Lennar and the partnership, they can develop real opportunities there, especially with the fact that they're going to make Mission Lakes. Or one of their big things they want to do is a very similar river walk park, 40-acre river walk like park, because they don't want a 40-acre lake anymore because groundwater will allow it. So they're rethinking what their
Yeah.
that park may be, and it actually looks quite nice. Just some.
No, and I like that. And I think as long as we as a city continue to support them and that they know that we're not trying to back out of anything and they know that we will help with those endeavors, I think that's a partnership that ensures that we have the opportunity for commercial growth in that area, not just including residential. That's going to happen. California's short on residential, so we know it's there. But they just have to know that we're going to be there to continue to support that, because that doesn't always happen on the south side of 7th Standard. That support is quote unquote there, but it's sometimes difficult to do business because of the bureaucracy that exists. Again, the nice thing about playing with a nice small town community, you don't have a lot of that.
I've been in regular contact with that broker on the Lennar commercial piece that's next to Gossamer Grove. And as Steve said, just not quite the saturation yet, but the front is retail. Front 11+ acres is retail. The back is mixed use. It's total of almost 20 acres. That, when that goes, and that's all on our side of the street. So it's definitely the potential there, wherever that comes from, it's going to be a point of destination. So I'm not sure of the timing on it, but it's going to happen.
Well, the planning and the talking is what gets to that point.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
And I
can't be impatient.
apologize for taking time. I do want to ask a question. I feel like I hound this more often than I should, but the rail services. So transport, I'm asking it to you guys, the rail services is I wasn't here when you guys decided on the rail service, but I think it's a great opportunity and it's a touchy subject sometimes. But if transportation, based on what you showed in that previous presentation, is I think 30% of the growth that we're seeing economically, and if Shafter is the population center of California, wouldn't that rail hub be something significant for people to be looking at right now, especially knowing what's going on in the Long Beach, Oakland areas?
really of the rail identity. They are very touchy about where they're gonna have their rail hub. And so until you have the railroad on board, it's a fight along the way.
Who do we need to get?
I fight them all the time on projects to have rail service. And they, ports, you would think what they're doing, but they still have the mentality of anything under a 500-mile transport is too short. They have not changed their mindset yet.
And we've had several approaches, as you know, Brent Green's moved in that direction and it just has never been ready, but it's still an asset for us that will make it someday. It's going to happen.
A green
We're gonna
asset,
benefit.
a green asset.
That's right, huh?
That's a good point. If
What's that?
we have a Kern Transportation Foundation
Yes.
Transportation Conference, and we've got the Port of LA coming in to talk about congestion. We've got a rail expert coming. He's a consultant to talk about current and future of what that's going to look like, which gives Kern County an opportunity. And we also have the BNSF logistics guy to come in and talk about so they'll talk about their vision for the future, and we're trying to get them to focus on Kern County, their message. So they'll probably give a broader view, but hone in a little bit on the local area too, on what kind of future we have.
And based on the news I just watched today or yesterday, I mean, transportation, trucking is suffering right now. COVID obviously hasn't helped any of that, and people aren't coming back into those jobs. And when these ports do release everything that's sitting out there, there's no way that stuff's going to get to us in time. So what a grand opportunity to say we can get it to the center of California within an X amount of time and then disperse from there.
And I think that's why they have to change the mindset a little bit, because the trucking industry is challenged with not only the new truck requirements.
Yeah, carb laws.
But the owner operators who don't want to buy new trucks because it's going to change in 2035, that they have to go full electric, and electric's not available yet. AB 5 has really put a damper on the drivers because of their contract drivers that's being eliminated. The union laborers at the ports, they're not working 24/7. They've now put that requirement on, but they still have a hard time between midnight and 6 a.m. They don't get work. They get about 4 hours. So there's a multiple issues with the global supply chain. So, and with those containers sitting in the ocean, they're not getting back to the Chinas of the world in order to get new product out.
Yep.
So it's a whole process, but I do believe that at some point the rail is going to have to change their mind. How they're going to service the market.
What's the date of that conference?
October 28th.
8 to 4 at all the drive. Yeah,
You should have received it.
already-
but
already signed up.
it went- oh, you
Did you?
What date is it?
Next
October
Thursday.
28th.
It's next Thursday.
It's at Odell's.
Mhm. Whenever. I got the flyer.
Are we allowed to go to that?
Yes, it's
It's
open.
open to the public.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had it
Well, I'm
from,
going.
I had it from the previous
I don't know if
session.
there's a registration.
Guess I don't have it. Send it to me. I'm not seeing it,
Yasmin, you get it.
please.
She'll get it.
Thank you, Yasmina.
Because it went out to all of our.
Yeah, it goes all the time. Yeah, that's
But
that's on my
that's not
calendar.
gonna happen.
I blocked the whole day.
Let me tell
and
you-
then
let me
blocked the
tell
whole day
you
for that
this,
stuff.
you need to talk.
Okay, I'm gonna
Close out my section here
discussing the threats that we discussed in our conversations. And of course, water supply, always a threat in California. The uncertainty of high-speed rail, I mean, there's a lot of talk about that and lately about how the funding is going to go and who's going to support that. And then somebody mentioned that the physical barriers creating throughout the county and especially here. We've got of course, the decline in oil and ag that are going to require us some to changes in the jobs. And then we have some sales tax that is focused in some specific suppliers and providers. Any changes there are a potential threat to us as well. Others that you thought of, other threats to our economic development that came to mind since our conversations?
Double, triple, quadruple circle that last one.
Indeed. So good, thank you. All righty, thank you. Thanks for appreciate those conversations we had, and I'm going to turn it over to our city manager.
All right, Mayor and Council, good discussion so far. So we'll continue. The next item we want to cover is talk a little bit about some city-owned projects that we have. Based on our inventory of city-owned vacant properties, we have about 13 lots, and they vary in size from about 33 acres down to about just 2-acre parcels that are all city-owned throughout the city. I thought that this would be a good conversation to have, because the fact the city owns property affords us an opportunity to pursue development projects in which the city can capitalize on bringing in new opportunities. One of the keys is to have, in my opinion, to have these parcels shovel ready. We talk about streamlining our development process. We have a one-stop shop in which the developer can come in, meet with our planning folks, our engineer, building, and be able to streamline their project. And I think having shovel ready means that we, the city, would basically serve as the developer. A developer would typically come in, buy a piece of land, do the due diligence into the property itself, make sure there's no contaminants or anything like that. It's a clean piece of land. They will then do the planning aspect, go working with our planning director. They'll submit their plan, make sure that their project is consistent with the general plan, with zoning, mitigate any impacts, do an environmental review. They'll work with our public works, our engineer staff, to make sure that there's adequate drainage, infrastructure such as water, sewer capacity, transportation in terms of roads, or any offsite improvements that are necessary for their project, as well as getting their site plan approved, their building plans approved, and all of that falls under our one-stop center. Having a piece of land that's shovel ready would allow us to, one, the city more or less control our destiny. If we were to serve as a developer and undertake the planning, the engineering, and entitle the piece of land, we can then do an RFP out to developers and say, hey, we have a 3-acre parcel. The city has entitled it. We've done the environmental review. We've done the offsite improvements if there were any. And that serves as an incentive. And the city can do one of two things. That cost to us, we can either build it into the sale price when we sell it to the developer, or it's the city's incentive to that developer to say, hey, we incurred $50,000 worth of staff time and studies into this property. But if you want to come into Shafter, this is our economic incentive to you in order for us to attract that. That's one option. The other option, the other advantage it gives us is that we, the city, can then decide what kind of business or industry or project we want in that parcel. Oftentimes we get developers that'll come in and they have a particular project and they try to sell us on why their project is good for us. And then we have a choice of whether we support it or not. But once they submit their application, and given all the legislative bills that have passed in recent times with our wonderful state of California and their wisdom to try to take local land control from cities, it might be more difficult for us to be able to control that, especially if it's a housing developer. And so having shovel-ready parcels would definitely give us an advantage in being able to, one, pursue projects that are consistent with what we just talked about, that are consistent with our niche, are consistent with our community, provide goodwill to the community, foster that type of culture. And I think that puts us in a better position for us to be able to bring in what we'd like to see for our community. The other ideas for the type of project concepts is we can do straight commercial projects, do a little shopping center. We can do mixed use. Mixed use is where you have commercial on the bottom, residential on top. That's basically would be like a two-story concept. You see that in a lot of cities that have limited land, and they find that as a means to capitalize. And the concept behind that is for the residential part of it to have commercial businesses below that would be supported by the residential on top, a coffee shop, for example, a deli, a dry cleaners, even a nail shop or something to that effect. Those are all examples of mixed use. There's a concept I'm familiar with too called work, live. This is life, but I should say live, work, live. And that's for the entrepreneurial type of projects. That's where, let's say it's a bakery and the business will open the bakery down below and they have their housing unit up top, or a barbershop on the bottom, the residential on top. And that's a concept that's called the work, live development to help promote that entrepreneurship and affords people to not only open their business, but then have their place to live right above. Industries, business to business, a concept that Bob and I have talked about, and Bob has reached out to the managers at the industrial park, the wonderful industrial park, is we know that they're going automated. They got robotics throughout all of their warehouses. There's somebody supplying those parts. There's somebody, it's some business, whether it's overseas or across the country in the East Coast, Midwest, wherever it may be, that's providing those replacement parts to them. They're being manufactured someplace, they're being shipped from somewhere. I think that serves as an opportunity for us to capitalize that. And if they're coming from out of state and we're not stealing that business, that industry from another city within the state, we might be able to get them to establish the point of sale here in Shafter. Richard talked about that business to business with having the point of sale. That's an opportunity for us to go after those type of industries because we have a market here. It's not like we're telling businesses, hey, we think there's going to be logistics centers. No, we know we have the logistics centers today. There's probably 8-9 million square feet of warehouse spacing. That's only half built. Been talking with John Wynn over at Wonderful. We know that they are planning to continue to fully develop their master plan to build out the 1,600 acres. They also have talked about future expansion plans for additional warehouse space around that existing industrial park. So there's definitely an opportunity there. We know that Patterson is just about 2.5 hours up north. They have a lot of logistics warehousing space, Inland Empire area. And there's also Tejon Ranch. Fresno is about 2 hours away. Visalia, even today, is now starting to get into the warehouse space. So within a 2-mile, 3-mile radius, there's several million square feet of warehouse that they can service. So that's definitely an opportunity that we can pursue. There's even housing. And now that we're coming out of COVID, I mean, Mayor and I were recently at a Rotary event, and we heard quite a bit about senior housing. Not necessarily affordable senior housing, but market rate senior housing. The thinking there is there's long-term residents of Shafter whose children have moved on, grown up, and they may be wanting to scale down. They don't necessarily want the bigger house with the yard to take care of, but having senior housing, I think a lot of you have probably gotten comments in my conversations with you that you've been hearing from residents is maybe some senior housing, even some entry level type of housing, condos, townhomes. We have Richland School District, we have Grow Academy, we have Shafter High. It'd be wonderful to get a lot of those teachers, young professionals that don't necessarily want the house in the yard to take care of, but we can build condos, townhomes to be able to capture them for them to be able to live here. I think that all presents opportunities for us to pursue those type of projects within Shafter with the lands we have available. This is a map of the different city-owned properties that we have. The yellow is the properties that we have throughout the city. We'll provide to you a spreadsheet of the different properties. But like I said, we have properties from as large as almost 34 acres to about 2-acre parcels. As you can see in the map, they're spread throughout the city. They're not concentrated in any one particular area. And so that affords us an opportunity to diversify development of these parcels in not just in one area, but throughout the city. To give an example, we know that the Recreation District is looking to build a large sports complex on Laredo Highway, just across the street from our former MCCF facility. They're talking about a multi-purpose room. They're talking about tournament style soccer fields and baseball fields. And I think that presents us an opportunity because the city owns 3 parcels along Laredo, just north of where they plan to build the sports complex. This is all conceptual, right, what I'm sharing with you. But one opportunity is we might be able to say, pursue a small boutique hotel, a 50, 60 room hotel, a sit down restaurant, whether it's a local restaurant, preferably that's looking to expand, or if we get one out of Bakersfield, or even maybe a national chain, but I think preferably something local, some small businesses that would be able to support the recreation activities that would be taking place. Parents will be coming with their families, the players will be there, you know, whether it's a pizza place, sit down after the games, you know, have a nice dinner, entertain themselves, they have a place to stay. That does a couple different things. It brings revenue in the form of TOT, transit occupancy tax with the hotel. It brings in sales tax from whatever commercial businesses or restaurants we're able to attract. But that's an example of how we can be strategic and how we develop our parcels. And so that in itself definitely presents a lot of good opportunities for us when we talk about what we want to do with our properties. Now, the only hiccup with that is, again, the wonderful state of California passed AB 1486, the Surplus Land Act, and which that requires that in the state's wisdom to address affordable housing, they passed AB 1486, which requires that all in city districts that have land, that before they can sell it to a private party, they have to go through a 60-day noticing period. As you know from what we've done here, we've recently done that on 2 different city parcels that we are selling to private development. Across the street, which would be a future car wash and a drive-through restaurant, or we don't know for certain what they're going to ultimately bring in, but we had to go through that. Recently, we're also in tonight on our regular agenda, we have the purchase sale agreement for the property on 250 Carver for another business that's looking to purchase and develop that site for a future warehouse as well. And what we've had to do is go through a 60-day noticing period in which we had to make available through the state at HCD, Housing Community Development, to basically notice and say, hey, the city of Shafter has a piece of property available for sale, and it basically makes it available for any developer in their hopes for housing. Now, what the act requires us to do is in the event there is a housing developer that's interested in that piece of land, we have to negotiate in good faith with that developer. Doesn't say we have to sell them the land, but it says we have to negotiate in good faith. If at the end of the day we don't reach agreement, then we basically just walk away from that, and we've met the compliance of AB 1486. The alternative to that, and some cities are beginning to go down this path, the act allows us to forego the 60-day notice period and not put it up available for any affordable housing developer, but rather we would have to pay 30% of the sale price proceeds and put those monies in a housing fund. So let's say a piece of property that we sold, Carver, just 250 Carver, it's not what we're selling it for, but I'm using this as an example. Let's say we sell it for $100,000 and we said, you know what, we didn't want to do the 60-day noticing, we're going to sell it outright to this developer for $100,000. The law requires us to set aside 30% of the 100,000. So 30,000 of it would have to go into a housing fund. for a future developer, if the city were to develop a housing project, or we had a housing project proposed, we can make those monies available to put towards that project. So that's one way to get around having to put it out to bid. And that's a business decision for us. If at the end of the day, we did our financial analysis, perform a cost benefit analysis, however, whichever one we chose to do, and we determined, let's take the example of the hotel restaurant in front of the sports complex. We may decide that the TOT and the sales tax that's generated from that project outweighs the benefit of us putting 30% of the sale proceeds into a housing fund. Well, that's a business decision. We can go ahead and say, you know what, we're going to generate more TOT on sales tax. And so therefore, we're just going to pay the 30% penalty and not make it available for a housing development type project. And we know that when we sell it, 30%, we're bound to set aside 30% of the proceeds. It's a business decision. But again, there is some ability for us to be able to can still control our destiny and how and what we do with these properties. And I think that definitely warrants a future discussion in terms of if that's something that we want to do in terms of preparing these parcels to be shovel ready. We would come back to you with a budget, let you know how much work each of these properties would entail in terms of entitling it and going through any improvements, due diligence to get them shovel ready. Any comments, thoughts on that? So
How are these properties listed right now? Or is there any way of knowing?
yeah,
What do you mean listed?
Well, I mean, who,
Like
if
zoning?
someone's, no,
No,
if someone's interested in buying a piece of property, how would they know where to go to look for them?
well, for one, we haven't put any of these up for sale.
no, I don't
Yeah.
think that's what we want to do. I don't think
No.
we want to list the property. People know that they come to City Hall and find out if there's anything that they have a project they want to put on, and we might decide whether it's conducive to what we want.
Okay.
So right now, just for the record, none of these properties are listed for sale. We've not listed them. The only two that we have entertained selling is the one across the street for the drive-through car wash. The developer approached us, they're the same developer that built the Taco Bell, and they approached the city probably 2 years ago, I guess. If we had any land available for a drive-through car wash and another type of amenity. The 250 Carver, it's a business out of Delano that through Bob's contacts approached them, said, hey, we're looking to relocate our business. Do you guys have any land? And that's how we were able to work with them to attract them and bring them into Shafter. But we did not actively go out and put these properties up for sale. Now, I think the one across the street may have gone up for sale, Bob? No? Okay. But other than that, none of these other properties are for sale presently.
All of these properties have something on them already. All of them except for, well,
What do
I
you
would
mean
say
they
two.
have something?
All these little yellows already have something on them.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're either a sump.
Yeah.
Or a park.
So the map, we can fine tune it, but I'll send you the list that actually shows, I think there's like 13 properties that, is it 13, Bob?
I don't see how you get 13. Parcels.
Yeah, parcels. Yeah.
Yeah, majority of that is just sumps, and then what's left is parks. And then there's theoretically 5 locations you can work with. 2 of them are already named as parks. And so there's not a lot.
Yeah. Other comments? So Bob and I were brainstorming and just to stimulate some discussion in terms of proposed goals. This is a workshop to develop some economic development strategic goals or strategy. And here's just a list. Again, we're not recommending these. It's just to help stimulate that discussion. I know that we had some discussion about some other ideas that were proposed during Bob's presentation. So here we have revitalized downtown. I think we've continued to, this is a carryover from 2011. that identify the downtown as something that we should continue to work. I think we have a charming downtown that does give us an opportunity to do further development and revitalization. Pursue private investment for shovel-ready development. That's kind of the concept we just talked about, to be able to take our city-owned parcels and to get those shovel-ready. Seek private development to complement recreation destination. We continue to build parks, and then with the rec district, hopefully they are successful with their project in sports complex. I think that when we talk about destination, gives us an opportunity to capitalize on that. Develop Shafter brand and marketing strategy. You heard Richard talk about the brand. I think that's important. Mayor, I think you said at some point we had talked about branding and marketing, and I think that should be something we take up. That's consistent with the staple thing. What are we known for? What's our niche? I think the bones are there. The framework is there. We're a safe community. We have the survey that we just did here with CSU being, which identified Shafter as being a great city as to why people live here. It's safe. We have good infrastructure, education, schools, job, housing. And I think those are all pluses as to why we would be a good community and how we brand ourselves. Identify public-private partners to retain a more skilled workforce. Retrain, I mean, not retain. I took Mayor Pro Tem's earlier word, it stuck in my head, and of retaining versus retraining. Continue to expand broadband and fiber capabilities by partnering with private sector to manage and operate the city fiber network. Partner with private industry to maybe outsource the rail yard. Maybe that's something that we look at is outsource it, and which we collect a franchise for it. We bring in a private operator to manage and operate the rail yard, and we lease it to them in some form, and we're able to.
I believe that that's an asset that we want to generate more than revenue of leasing.
Mhm.
It goes way big. It's
Yeah.
much bigger than just leasing the property, so.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we can talk more about. Continue to invest in education, youth, and adults. Those, again, are just some goals that Bob and I brainstormed about, but we definitely want to hear from you in terms of whether these are aligned. Obviously, having these many for a strategic plan is quite a bit, but narrowing them down, or definitely we want to hear from you in terms of what you see are those strategic goals. I think one of the other ones that came up was looking at volunteer center, or whatever we ultimately call that, established volunteer center or call center, where, I mean, that's something that we can also identify as a strategic goal. So at this time, I'd like to open it up and hear from you in terms of your thoughts.
Well, the only thing I'd like to say right now is about the rail. If leasing is all we have, I'd rather do leasing than not do nothing with it. So what's that? So you rather not lease than just let it just be
It's
there?
not enough revenue for what we have. The asset is more valuable than that. And I think that we need to focus in. And even as Melinda was saying, what's being proven already, what's happening in the ocean as well as in the
Mhm.
supply chain and all. Something will happen big time out here, and we will generate a lot of revenue out there. We could even exceed what we get in sales tax.
Well, if that opportunity
least.
comes,
Absolutely.
absolutely, we'll jump on the opportunity, but if nothing's happening, if
Right.
it doesn't work out, we
Yeah,
gotta
but
do
all-
something with, sell it, buy it,
Yeah.
do something with it,
No,
other,
I don't think we'd sell it.
no, I understand that, but you gotta do something with it. I
Yeah.
mean, you just wanna hold on to it. I mean, opportunities come up,
For the right
month to
time.
month contract or something. You would just just bypass it? Would you be willing to do a month to month or something?
I'd be pretty risky to do a month
Yeah.
to month. I think something will happen. You'll see.
Yeah,
You
well.
just have to be patient for it.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the idea. We just brainstorm ideas but I don't think we should be just closed-minded. Oh, no leasing, no. I think everything should be talked and exposed and,
Mhm.
worked through, so.
Right.
So maybe, sorry to interrupt, maybe it's, what I'm kind of hearing is to identify the best and highest use for the rail yard. I don't know, that's kind of captured what the discussion's about. Yeah.
Well, the other one is our CCF facility that's over there too. I mean, that's another one that you've heard me say that before too. I mean, there's a way to generate some revenue that could be big, and yet maybe we need to lease a certain section of it for something that's going to benefit the whole community. That doesn't have as big a value for me, as I see, as what this rail does, because the rail could really be a huge future. I mean, not just for Shafter, but beyond. It's just.
No,
it's-
absolutely. I agree, but it
it's-
just,
Yeah.
I mean, when is the opportunity going to come? 5 years, seven
It may-
years,
It may have
you
to
know?
take 3 to 5 years even.
you
yeah.
know? But for meanwhile,
There.
it's like the CCF building. We just hold on to it, make it, continue paying the maintenance on it, or do we do something like you said, at least half of it, or do something, whether something's better than nothing,
Mhm.
at least cover the expenditures that we have for monthly keep ups, at least that. And just trying to wait for an opportunity. So,
Okay, anyone else? I don't know. What do you see that can come out here? I mean, you've been around, you toured so many of the other states and other areas, and what do you see the possibility? That's where I struggle with it, because we had opportunity to put a rail in, we had opportunity to put the prison in, and now we've got two potentials that can really do something big for us, and I don't know what it is. I mean, I see a call center. Call centers seem to be great for generating revenue, and yet,
Call centers are great revenue
Right.
generators for the retail call center.
yeah,
There's just challenges with call centers in general.
yes. And well, and you see the issues with sales tax now, so we got to look beyond
Right.
that.
And our labor laws really have
Yes.
a downside on call centers, so we do struggle with that. We are a huge market for e-commerce. It's gonna continue. To diversify though, we are actually seeing a lot more manufacturing. And these are new types of manufacturing, which actually are clean manufacturing companies. Food processing is still huge. We just have a big challenge because of water.
Hmm.
They're usually large water users. But what we're finding is because we have some water issues in house, are definitely finding ways to cycle and to find a way to manage that water supply. Generally, there's still an initial startup water, but they're managing it. We can usually work with them on that. So that is still a very high priority. What we're seeing in the Inland Empire and the Orange County area with the pricing and lack of availability, it's an automatic shift to come north. And they're looking at this area quite heavily
Mhm.
because of it. So there's always room for development. They're always looking for opportunities for e-commerce. It's not going away. Even though they're competing with Amazon in a sense, it's just a moving target. But what we're seeing is that even though we've got the e-commerce logistics component, the wages are increasing, the skill sets are increasing. So these are actually good environment for our rural areas, because they do provide good jobs, good pay, their full benefits, retirement, education. They really do that up. Manufacturing, even though that is a nice industry, don't have quite the job creation, but they're a little higher paid as well. And it's a growing market. They start out small and then they continue to grow, because expansion is huge in manufacturing and the food processing. So, I mean, that's what we're seeing now. I mean, right now, a lot of the renewable manufacturing is coming into play. There's a lot of new hydrogen energy that's coming into play, renewable diesel that we're seeing. So there's just a lot of green energy. We're starting to see a little more solar manufacturing. There's a variety of type of projects that are looking in the area. So definitely a logistics hub. But there's other opportunities. So I'm not going to turn away the logistics either, because it's an ongoing growth, and these jobs are increasing skill sets that we need to be ready for. So we've got the good and the bad situation with it, but big boxes, but they provide a lot of jobs.
Well, you have to start somewhere. Yeah, that's the thing.
I have two questions. One is, I think I shared this with Bob. The big boxes that we have at WIP, in a pay scale that they're providing, can I buy a house at Gossamer Grove with me being employed at WIP, one of the big box facility? That's one of my questions. Number two, talking about the harbors being full of the ships out there with the freight, which we know that. And the day that they decided to offload all those containers, we had some distribution centers here in WIP location asking, for example, just an example, Walmart cold storage place, hey, why don't we have that thing trained into Shafter, offloaded here for them instead of using the semis? Because I know there's gonna be a big demand of truck drivers, which there's not many, so the stuff is still gonna be backed up. Using the freight and just making this location drop off, so the ones that we have local drivers could just get it from Shafter to the distribution center or whatever location there in our little logistics center.
And that has been the topic for quite some time. That's the purpose of creating the rail container yard and different things to that aspect. But the railroad has not been on board with that yet. And that discussion is ongoing at the Port of LA, trying to figure out a way to get those containers on rail to get them out. We are not set up for an inland port as of yet, which is why, but it's up to the rail. The railroad could do it if they wanted. Let's just put it that way. They would have to create what this offloading or inland port, however you want to describe it, fits into their model. They build logistics parks all the time. But it has to make sense for their model, what they're looking for. And they're not easy to work with. They're a tough animal. They have their.
So I guess now the question would be for us to take advantage of our little rail system here, or rail port that we have. What is the requirement? Trying to find out, what are they looking for to meet their needs?
Well, as of now, which we cannot convince them otherwise, they still have that 500-mile.
Okay, so that's going to be a roadblock.
Right. That
Okay.
has not changed.
Okay, so that's.
But
Mhm.
I think there's opportunity here because of the fact what's happening in the global supply chain.
Right, because there's going to be a huge demand to get those containers. This is going to be like an emergency moment.
Yeah, the problem that we may see is the design of the inland port. Because the way Wonderful has identified, or not identified, has built their park, it changed the concept of a logistics park. And so as of now, they would have to move a little bit further north to get the available rail for them to do an inland port, according to the railroad. Okay, so that's not me talking. It's them talking. And this is just from conversations with them about, you could put in a logistics park in that state with less acreage, but why can't you do it here? The park is just the way it's designed.
So going back to what Mara was talking about, the opportunity. So can we have the opportunity, or is this never going to be an opportunity?
I can't answer
Okay.
that because it really is going to fall back into the hands of the railroad.
So if the railroad is requiring a bigger rooms, bigger space, if that's going to be something that, because they could dictate, and
Can't dictate how it.
and we're wanting their business, we want the opportunity, and we don't follow those guidelines, we're never going to have, because we're not going to be set up for that moment.
It depends on what they want to use it for. Now, if, this just comes from my exposure to them, is that it just really depends on the volume that they're gonna want to have that comes through here. Right now, let's just use, and then it depends on the customer. Because if the customer doesn't want to drop here, you don't have any.
Right.
Walmart, for instance, the cold storage. Most food products will not go on the rail.
Right.
Because of the spoilage. So You know, it's really gonna take the Amazons of the world and the normal Walmart of the world to dictate to the railroad,
Mhm.
I wanna drop my product there.
So being that we have scheduled, I believe, a Amazon in Shafter. We have a Ross in Shafter. We have a Target in Shafter. We do have May-Junkin, I mean, it's not May-Junkin anymore, but it was called MRC,
Mhm.
Bakersfield Pipe.
Yep.
They, lot of pipes, valves and fittings. They,
None of them use rail.
okay, well, I know May-Junkin did at one time when they were on Pegasus.
So what happens, and here's the model as it is today, and I don't know if it's gonna change. I mean, there's discussions with the ports, there's discussions with the rail to try to get that concept changed. But right now, and it's all a perception of being close to the ports. So let's use Target for an example. Target, their product comes into the port, it is trucked to Rialto, to their regional distribution facility. From that facility, they disperse all their products to different distribution facilities. Amazon does the same thing. Ross is kind of a different model because it's a pick and pack. So it comes in here and it's picked and packed. But they don't use rail. Now, would they use rail if they had it? I'm gonna venture to say they would, because they have a lot of product coming in and out. But it's just not, they haven't been able to come to those agreements with the railroad at this point.
Okay.
And also, mentioned the affordability for these jobs. So I wanted to point out a couple of things. So if you look at our region, I think I was checking the affordability index for about 56,000 a year. And so, I mean, jobs you're probably thinking 40. Maybe you have part-time in the family, full-time. In addition to that, I mentioned the supplier jobs, which is some of the pay, the construction jobs and the like, in that range. So that's the thing in terms of affordability, these jobs, great affordability and purchase a home.
Well, that doesn't say that everyone though at the whip makes less than 56,000 because there are other opportunities there.
Well, and that's, you have to look at the whole
Right.
range of jobs, which even if you look at, let's say, a $20 an hour.
Right.
It's gonna put you at about 45 with benefits, and the affordability index is 55,000, so maybe, have one person in the household who works part.
Mhm.
That's a full-time job, which again, if you were in the Bay Area, the affordability index.
Oh, it's even higher. Sure.
So that's the thing, that you're looking for jobs that create the ability to move. upward
Be-
mobility.
Because what you see from my perspective, when you see a distribution center, you see more the working force. You don't see hundreds and hundreds of folks walking in suits in the distribution center. You see more of those that are packeting or driving forklift or, doing that kind of labor. Then that's where your $20 bracket comes in, $20-$25.
Well, and then you look at, we were ranked number 5 for upward mobility, the odds of moving from the bottom to come up to the top. So I mean, this ability to get the entry level and then move forward. Much like Boeing, most the bulk of the workforce is like jobs.
Mhm.
Again, for us, do they pay benefits? I mean, that's pretty important. Because think about fringe benefits are about 30% for a company when we pay health insurance. Well, that's 30%, 40%. So that's really critical.
You also have to put in the workforce development in there.
Mhm.
Workforce development is so important, is because our skill sets in our county is lower than other communities, which is why these jobs are so important for our community, because they can be trained in higher level positions where the upper mobility, as Richard's talking about, they increase their pay and have a very good living. in our communities.
And of course, it's not just here. You see that in all states, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
but the companies, and I understand too, that companies have started this training lab work, whatever you want to call it, because the companies then use that facility. As long as you're willing to build yourself up, the opportunities are going to be great. And that's what's happening out there too.
Well, and what's the advantage too is that these training programs is on the job training. So they're
Yes.
training them on their machinery, their products, so they're moving them up. And because there's a labor shortage nationally, that's what they have to do.
Mm.
They have to train within. And so it's, that's why workforce development is always top of the line for.
Yeah, and the other thing is turnover. So we
Mm.
compare ourselves versus the Inland Empire, other parts of the state and western states. And Kern County is one of the
Oh.
turnover, it's single
Okay.
digit. That's so important to employers because you go to the Riverside and it's, 30-40%. And so the thing we see within the logistics, they're hired and the vast majority of them have to stay at that job. And that's another indicator, right? That's sustainability. So we map our peer and metros in terms of that work ethic, low turnover rates.
The cost of living, the wages in are very comparable to what they are here, but the cost of living is much, much higher. So we're actually in a good spot for a living wage environment. I mean, yes, it looks, can they buy a home? But it takes a two-family.
Mhm. I just have one last question, and I won't say anymore, just because of time. So Richard, you pointed out something caught my attention. You said Ross, for example, using Ross, they're the ones that could mainly come direct from the harbors or straight here, something like that. You said something similar, or
So I said they,
I'm sorry.
everything is trucked up.
Okay, and then you said there was another Amazon or somebody who goes to the Empire, right?
Target. does
Target.
Regional
Okay.
distribution
Okay,
facility
so-
straight from the ports.
Okay, so in order to be part of that regional area, we had to have distribution centers that are regional type, or is it?
Well, the way Target looks at it is they pick their regional distribution location to closest to the port,
Okay.
obviously, and then depending on where they're distributing their product to their different distributions. So for instance, the distribution here, it only covers, this amount of area, like Glendale to Merced.
Okay,
Right, and then other distribution centers get a different product that cover a different area. So that's why they look at it that way. But the concept and the perception that they have and have had for quite some time is it's more beneficial for them to be closer to the port for their regional. facility.
so the demand is not as great because
Well,
it's smaller
it's
area, regional,
distance from
right.
the port is what they're
okay,
looking for. But now with the way the ports are with this
right.
challenge, there could be some different thoughts on how they're gonna be able to manage that.
So like American Tire, are they like half of the Western cover 4 or 5
Yeah,
states?
I forget where their market is.
Okay.
But, they all have their own regional area that they serve. That's why they have so many distribution
Right.
facilities all over California.
Okay.
Because they serve
But
certain
Inland
areas.
Empire usually was going from west to east, right, versus the valley here, it goes north, south to north.
Okay,
Right, so.
We have a better story now because before, coming over the hill seemed like a long drive for them, right?
mhm,
Well, now they can get here quicker because of the traffic. Going east-west now from the ports to the Inland Empire is a nightmare. They're stuck in traffic to and from. So they're sitting on the highway longer than it takes for them to get here. So that concept is changing, which is why you're seeing that shift coming north with the distribution. So,
okay.
but there's a lot of challenges in that global supply chain. Just getting them out of the port right now is their primary goal. There's like 60 cargo ships out there that probably carry, gosh, I don't know. how many containers. So those containers have to get back and they're just stuck. So we're not going to see product coming for a long time until they can get those uploaded.
Well, it's kind of like the lesson on energy independence. Would you rather have local production or be reliant on
Exactly.
foreign countries? And we see about 5% more oil imports in the 80s to 60%. And we always, you look at 16 large container ships create more pollution than all of this.
Mhm.
So this is the kind of deep dive we need to do.
Well, and it just didn't just happen either. It didn't just happen with the ships and all, you know,
You know,
it's,
It's slow, yeah.
not, and it just kind of
Congestion,
smacks.
And, you know, there's no growth available at the ports. They can't go
No.
anywhere. Right? They're landlocked. So they've tried all kinds of different ways to bring in more products. And we agree, the best way to get those products out there is put them on rail.
We
But
believe
have to
that
get
too.
rail on board. And both main
Yeah.
rail
I know,
lines
we hear
are
them all the
same
time.
pattern.
I love the trains.
Yeah, so it's a struggle, it's a challenge, and those talks are continuing to happen with the railroad, trying to get them to understand that there is a solution,
Mhm, mhm.
but it's all about money.
Well, and it's just the way that they've always been. It's always been that
It's
way.
hard to
The
figure it.
history is there.
It really is.
Are we gonna have a break?
Yeah, so, and it's a good discussion. Thank you, Richard, Melinda. So in terms of next steps, we will prepare the strategic plan. And the goals you have, is that okay? Is there a consensus to identify those as possible goals, bring it back to you, and then we can have some follow-up discussion that you guys can consider those, add your own, delete some, rank them, and go through that exercise. And then we'll present to you sometime in December for adoption. We will then prepare an actual implementation action plan for each of those strategic goals, and then bring back to you that implementation action plan for you to adopt. And that will be basically our direction for Bob to go forth and hunt. And that concludes our presentation for the work.
Search and conquer.
Very good.
Very good.
All right. Then I guess we should adjourn this meeting before we get a chance to open the next one, huh?
I will finally make a motion to adjourn.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Givens to adjourn the meeting and seconded by Councilmember Espinoza. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oh, okay.